Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching KTN Prime, and this is the discussion we're having today. The November 27th by-elections has already hit fever pitch. A heated contest is expected in Mbeere North and Malava constituencies in what could be the first political test for President Ruto and his former deputy ahead of the 2027 general election. And to have this discussion tonight, we have my very able panel. We have Dismas Mukua. Let's just begin from where am I? Very near to me is Kevin Osido, who is the Executive Director, County Governance Watch. In the middle there is Dismas Mukua, who is a political analyst. And to my far right is Ishmael Nyaribo, a lawyer. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Of course, we'll be expecting Stella Agara, who is a governance analyst, and I believe she should be on her way. As soon as she gets here, she'll be joining us. Gentlemen, there's been a lot of activities, heated contests, claims of rigging, claims of voter bribery, so much happening, especially during the campaign period. But I just want to hear first, before we go into the thick of the discussion, what do you see in the activities we have witnessed in the campaigning and the allegations and the preparedness of the IBC? I'll just begin with you, Ishmael Nyaribo.
Yeah, thanks. You see, this is expected of the campaign periods in our country. It is not new. In fact, now, not only that people are more democratic, but people are also more aware about their rights and any small mistakes that they would see around IEBC management of the elections, security, management of the campaigns will have a reaction. There are so many people who have been beaten and violence has broken up here and there. But more concerning to me is the fact that firearms are being used in political campaigns. And when we talk about firearms, of course, fingers are pointed to the state. You cannot talk about firearms in a country which is a legitimate government, which has a legitimate government for that matter, using firearms openly in public and assume that that is being done by some private hooligans. The government must be aware and definitely it must tame such an activity. So, yeah, there is excitement and we believe it will be demonstrated on 26th, or on 27th rather, yes.
Dismas, your view on what has been happening in the last couple of days?
Well, there's been a very high level of activity. In fact, somebody coming to Kenya for the very first time, they may think we are in 27 August. Because the kind of attention being placed on these by-elections is unprecedented. But again, one would understand where the politicians are coming from, because in the Kenyan political space, powerful politicians normally use by-elections to pronounce themselves ahead of the general election. You'd remember when former President Kenyatta wanted to take office, he came up with TNA, and he used the by-elections in Murang'a and Kajiado to say that, in fact, he has arrived. So all these big political parties would want to use the by-elections to test their 2027 election strategies and as well as scare their political competition. And when you look at the mix of candidates, all these political parties, some have got good candidates that you can actually write home about, and others have got horrible candidates. And we've said times above number that
what do you mean by horrible candidates?
I mean, we've said times above number that for Kenya to go to the next level, we need the candidates who have at least three things: character, capacity, and competence. Some of the candidates who've been presented have got character, capacity, and competence. Like, for instance, the UDA candidate for Malava, Ndakwa, is somebody that one can vouch for. But there are other candidates who have been accused. Their names have been tied to scandals. Their names have been tied to things that the Kenyan constitution doesn't like. So one begins to wonder whether the political parties in Kenya, that is all of them, UDA, ODM, some people are running as independents, whether Kenya doesn't have a very high appetite for those candidates who got character, capacity, and competence, and why voters occasionally tend to reward impunity, mediocrity, and corruption. Because if a candidate has presented himself, and that you have big stains on the reputation, and then voters will go ahead and elect that person to an elective office, and then expect when they get into the office to behave like saints. Then that is the reason why voters immediately, after IBC pronounces a winner, they start suffering from voters' remorse. They realize they've just made a mistake, maybe because of, we understand the allegations of bribery that in some parts of Kenya where these by-elections are taking place, people stop pretending, taking care of their farms a long time ago, and they'll start after the by-elections are done and concluded.
Consider your views on what is happening in the country.
A lot is happening in the country, but I think that the context of the content of the context, the discussion basically is an upcoming by-election. And I think for me, one of the things that we have to take note of is that the Commission has to realize that this is a test for its confidence, especially insofar as electoral preparedness is concerned. And given the kind of background that IEBC has had, where prior to its formation, rather putting together the commissioners, we had a lot of challenges, including people, suspecting that certain politicians were involved in identifying and even putting in place some of the commissioners' challenges with the vetting process. We had candidates who were brought in late after the process had started. So this commission has a lot of confidence to put in the electorate. And that confidence is also bordering on public trust. I remember that already there are sentiments around rigging and how the IEBC is going to respond or has already responded to some of these issues. So a lot is at stake because, again, we are looking at roughly 18 months to the general election. So this is also more or less like a dry run to the commission, particularly based on the post-election report that was done by the former commission for 2022 general election, some of the recommendations that were also put together by both international observers, the local observers, and even the political parties themselves, who are major players in this particular by-election. So it's a dry run for them, and I believe that they really have to pull up their socks in certain areas, particularly insofar as security is concerned. And it is quite disheartening that we have to lose every time we have elections. We have to lose lives. And so the commission has to really rein in on some of these characters who believe that violence has to be characterized with Kenyan elections, and especially coming from a history of a country where we have had very violent elections that have also ended up to the ICC. And I don't think that that is a history that Kenyans want to be taken back to. Number two, I think for some of the parties, particularly ODM, it's going to be interesting to look at how this plays post Raila Amolo Odinga, demise and burial, and really even looking at the infighting, quote unquote, that is happening within ODM, and how they are going to galvanize their support, so that even during the campaigns, there are figures that were expected to show up and the campaign for some of the candidates. If you focus on Homa Bay, for example, it would have been expected that certain political party leaders or individuals within ODM would have gone to Homa Bay to campaign for Boy Duere, among others. You look at, for example, in Magarini, where ODM is expected or is perceived to be having very a strong followership, and all the way to Banisa and even in Ugunja. So we are looking forward to seeing how the politics is going to play, both within the pre-process, so that is campaigns and all that, then during, and then post, upon the announcement of the candidates, how, of course, that is going to also play in within ODM, and especially towards dealing with some of the internal wrangles, quote unquote.
I know you've mentioned the issue of stakes.
Yeah.
And of course, for a Kenyan who's watching today wants to understand, what does this by-election mean for Kenya? What does the by-election the by-elections that are happening on Thursday mean for the country and, of course, the political class? And I'll just begin with you, Dismas.
Well, for people, especially the powerful politicians who have come up with new political parties, especially an organization like DCP and the party leader, the candidate that is campaigning for, if that candidate wins, then Rigiji would have caused a storm, especially in Mount Kenya, and everybody will want to be aligned with him, because essentially he would have given a warning shot that if you're not in my team, then 2027 is going to be a bloodbath. You are going nowhere. And you remember that is what President Kenyatta did when he told people that if you're not in TNA, you are not going to win in any by-election. And as soon as his candidates won, then TNA became a very powerful political party. Then everybody started, I mean, there was a stampede. Everybody wanted to be associated with TNA. Now, in the event that, say, candidates supported by Rigathi Gachagua lose, candidates supported by Fred Matiang'i lose, then their political capital will be drained. The political capital will go south. But if their candidates win, then it will give them a very strong view at the national level. And you've seen that happening in Western Kenya. I mean, who knew that Musalia Mudavadi, Moses Wetangula, and Oparanya would be in the same team campaigning for a candidate in Malava? I mean, they've said that they want to use this one to demonstrate that one of their own needs to be a running mate in 2027. That is why politicians have actually gone the extra mile. Even in Homa Bay, as Kevin has indicated, it's going to be very interesting because at some stage people thought it was automatic, an ODM candidate is going to win. But this gentleman who is running as an independent, understand he's gotten support from unlikely quarters, that the deputy governor has gone against what the governor wants and is campaigning for that independent candidate, including a gentleman called Odoyo Widi. So people are increasingly saying that with the exit of Raila, now we can breathe with ease. Because, you know, in the past, if Mr. Raila Odinga was in town, nobody would dare go against him, especially in that part of the world. But with his exits, now you have the deputy governor, who I understand during the last election wanted to become a governor, but he was told to come down, which he did. This time around, he's saying to the governor that I'm going to chart my own path. But the most important point, in my view, and Kevin has spoken to it slightly, is about IBC. IBC now, they need to demonstrate that in as much as when they were getting into office, people cast aspersions on their capacity and their competence, now they have to demonstrate that they've got capacity and competence and immunize themselves from misinformation and disinformation. Because a number of people that are generally known that they are going to lose have already started saying that there is voter bribery. They're claiming they've seen ballots which have already been marked.
Do you think there's some candidates who already know this is a win for me? And who do you think they are?
Yeah, you know, when you speak to irrational politicians, and you've got very few, but when you speak to a rational politician will actually know they're going to win. And a rational politician will know they're going to lose. And when you know you're going to lose, then you blame everybody apart from yourself. That is when you talk about voter bribery as if it's a new thing in Kenya. I mean, during every election, there is voter bribery. That one everybody knows, because when you have a meeting and you invite people to come for a rally, or even a small meeting, that people are given standing allowance, others are given sitting allowances, others are given lesos, they're given mandazi. I mean, that is really,
so basically,
I mean, the lawyers got another...
what Dismas is saying, Ishmael, is those who are making a lot of accusations that there's voter bribery, there's, you know, claims of rigging. Ishmael, does that necessarily point to the fact that these are already losers in the elections and perhaps they should just step back already?
You know, I heard Dismas say that they're more competent people. Then he mentioned Ndakwa in Malava. I was almost asking him, is that the same constituency where there is a gentleman called Panyako? So, different views and different versions, but it's not true. You cannot dismiss the fact that there are allegations of voter bribery. It's not only in Nairobi, it is in Arusha, Dar es Salaam, Washington, Seattle, in Egypt, all over the world. People, when we are approaching elections, people become more observant and they can tell that there is a wing that wants to actually rig us out. And that is not, that cannot be wished away, neither can you dismiss it. And therefore, it is important for people to be more careful between now and the night of 2027 and then the morning of 2028 to ensure that their will is protected. Once they have voted, they must escort their votes, protect their votes until final tallying has been done. That is the way it happens. And it's even worse in Africa, particularly in Kenya, where the interests override the institutional framework. We have an IBC that people are still wondering whether are they going to stand with the people and the constitution, or they are going to stand with the executive and the government of the day. So this is where the problem is. I wish that our democracy can grow to a level whereby we trust each other, we are able to point out that there's rigging allegations. You remember in 2017, if I'm not quite, during the time when Trump was accused of, rigging claims where they said he was making phone calls to, so these rigging claims are not for a particular individual or individuals. Anybody, because of the thirst for power, can actually, try to mess around, and that is why voters must be very, very aggressive in terms of protecting their votes. But coming back to the question you asked them, what this means to, the voter, the people, what does it mean for what does the by-election really mean? For me, it now means that we want to see the youth power, the Gen Z power. Just the other year, they were protesting and wreaking havoc all around because they felt that governance was not going the right way. Now you have an opportunity on 27th to both vote and protect the vote as young people, using gadgets, using mobilization and making sure that the votes are protected. This is the time to show your strength and to show your power. I know he wants to talk about Panyako, but I mean, you shouldn't be worried.
At the risk of being denied a visa to go to the U.S., during the U.S. presidential elections, Donald Trump went to all the media channels and he said that if I do not win, then this election is not free nor fair. That's what he said. It's on record. But as soon as he was pronounced, he said this election was free, fair, credible. We've done an amazing job. So politicians have got capacity to make statements to serve their selfish interest. If you're talking about voter bribery before the election, Nyaribo, a highly regarded lawyer, has acknowledged that it takes place. But probability of stealing an election, especially a by-election, one can go to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro and say probability of stealing in a by-election, it's almost zero. Because everybody is glued there. Now, for the case of Kenya, even the international media will be glued there because we don't have a lot of big stories happening in the region at this stage. So they'll be glued there. So it's practically impossible for somebody to manipulate this election because everybody, the stakes are extremely high. So for people are about to lose the election, they'll go to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro and start shouting, thief, 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 because they know they've not done a good job.
The government of the day is spending, sorry, I mean, my sister needs to give her comment.
Let me first even just introduce Stella.
Thank you. I mean, you've seen flights, I mean, aeroplanes all over the skies. You think somebody can spend this kind of money and accept to just lose and say, it was no more election. So, I mean...
Stella Agara, governance analyst, joins the panel. Stella, good to see you. I know you've heard what the gentlemen here are saying. Dismas here says most of those politicians who are claiming voter bribery, making claims of voter rigging, perhaps, those who are very loud about these accusations know that they are going to lose. On the other hand, Ishmael says that's not the case. But I just want to throw a question to you, Stella, because the issue of voter bribery, issues of rigging have been very prominent, and we've seen these claims coming up and counterclaims being made as well. But the question is, do we really are we in a position as a country to say we can trust that the IEBC will deliver a credible election? What do you think about the system we have right now of the IEBC?
Thank you, Leah. Let me first of all start by saying, because I've been observing for a bit in the conversation, let me first of all start by saying that this is exactly what is happening in the national campaigns in this country. If you have seen, the men are tagging and pulling in different directions, and the tagging and pulling has become extremely violent in some spaces, which makes it even impossible for women to participate in those kinds of campaigns. I'm just thinking about the recent events over the weekend and last week, where there were attacks on lead campaigners of certain groups. Those attacks may just look like managing one individual or stopping someone from campaigning for their candidate, but at the end of the day, they prevent vulnerable groups like women from participating in those elections. And for me, that is the first failure by IEBC, if you ask me, and they are failing in this exam terribly. Terribly, because number one, if you're not able to call out violence to what do you call it, disqualify candidates who outrightly support the violence, and you can see their supporters coming out to say, in this area, we are only going to be voting for so-and-so, Rigiji should not show up here, whoever should not show up here. That is not something that should be happening in an election in Kenya, especially not in a country that has held elections under this constitution and has tried to do election reforms over very many years of doing elections. That's one. Number two, one of the struggles I was having as I was listening to the gentlemen, and they're my very good friends, all of them, is the fact that we are speaking about this being a test for the IEBC because this is the first time this commission is actually holding an election. But the IEBC is a very old body. IEBC has technocrats who work there, and even how they are moved is done in a very careful way to maintain institutional memory, to ensure that there are no gaps in the planning of elections. So the commissioners, when they come in, do not come to start from a tabula rasa. They work with people who already know what should happen on the ground. Now, when I see individuals with questionable records, and I'm glad Dismas mentioned that in the conversation, finding their way into the elections, it goes to tell me that the agencies that IEBC is supposed to be collaborating with to make sure that the election is free and fair are not doing their job. The IEBC normally collaborates with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Agency. They are the ones who should have called out anybody who has corruption cases, including the oxygen case that we have had or whatever other cases that we have had. They're the ones who should be calling out the people with questionable sources of funding who are participating in elections. I'm made to understand in Kasipul, for example. They're the ones who should be telling us when the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission does not speak. They allow for these conversations to continue as rumors. And unfortunately, it's poisoning the environment around which voters are going to be voting. It will be extremely difficult to tell them that this is a free and fair election when they have had rumors that have not been dispelled by anybody. I don't think I have had, unless I did not see it in the news, I don't think I've had this agency saying that everybody is above board. And the fact that they're silent when these candidates have been cleared by IEBC means either IEBC has ignored their advice or they have not advised IEBC, and my bet is they have not advised IEBC concerning these candidates. The other groups include the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties. When you have an entire political party bullying people on the ground, how is it that the elections are ongoing and that party has not been called out, has not been summoned, has not received any reprimand from the IEBC? For me, the kind of misbehavior happening in this election is just a testament to what is coming in 2027. And unfortunately, we cannot approach that election with these kinds of games. This is a by-election. There are fewer constituencies to focus on. There are fewer people to vet. Well, a big number in terms of just 24 constituencies producing 180-something candidates, but still there are fewer, and it should have been the space in which all of these agencies, including the educational institutions that are supposed to be clearing candidates for educational qualifications, the registrar, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the police, everyone should have used this as an outcome harvesting space to understand where are the hearts of people, how are people behaving now towards the election, what are the stakes. This is a very high-stake election.
We did see the IEBC take action against 2 candidates in Kasipul constituency, find them, and of course gave a warning saying if any more violence is reported, then there will be a cancellation of the candidature.
You know, it's easier to actually...
Isn't that at least
it's easier.
A step that shows that the IEBC perhaps is taking action?
It is easier to disqualify a candidate in a by-election than to disqualify them in a main national election. I would say this is the point where IEBC needs to strike, because it's going to be difficult to disqualify anybody in 2027. And for people to behave themselves, they need to have a reference in this by-election to say, you know what, if it happened in the by-election, maybe we don't want to try these games. So I'm saying there could have been more punitive about these things, and even before disqualifying them for many other things, some of them even extending campaign time beyond the time they should, this is the election where they should actually crack the whip so that they can test the ground on what is happening. The amount of resources being spent in this campaign are also a question of disparity. There are certain constituencies where a lot of money has been poured, and of course we have not completed that conversation as a country about capping campaign spending and ensuring that there's fairness, even in the participation in elections between the poor and the rich. Unfortunately, that's not something that the IEBC or the agencies around this election can be able to resolve now, but this is one election to watch, and we probably want to answer those questions after the by-elections to see what should we be doing between now and the next election to ensure that we do not have people who have a lot of resources for the elections skewing everything, including the security agencies, against the voter and basically influencing even how the voter behaves towards the election.
Sido, going by what the... Sorry, just go ahead, Ishmael.
Yeah, because you need, I mean, I want to talk about helicopters, but I think my sister has brought more important issues, and I just want to mention that, you see, institutional framework and strengthening institutions is actually very critical and important in the elections period, including IEBC. But then, this is not only IEBC, this also includes, you know, security organs where, you know, when you talk about, for example, IEBC calling out an individual, really, let's be fair to everybody, not supporting nor supporting, but the point is there should be cogent evidence. In terms of an institution doing something, maybe to bar a candidate, there should be cogent evidence. I mean, there were firearms in Malava. Now, I mean, was that Panyakos or Andakwas or state-sponsored or whatever? In this analysis, definitely, I will vouch for saying that when you talk about firearms, that is government involved and or knows who is using the firearm. But then you need cogent evidence. You cannot outlaw or bar Panyako or Andakwa on the basis of the firearm, you see. So what I'm trying to say, while I support fully that you know, such kind of candidates should be called out. Now you talk about Kasipul, people are being killed. Even before the actual electioneering began, the campaigns, people are being killed. And we are told those who are supporters of so-and-so and not, you know, you need cogent evidence to know that, yes, this particular individual was actually sent by this candidate and therefore must be barred. And this is where Kenyans must support institutions and be vigilant so that you don't just, you know, we can do a lot of shouting, a lot of activism, but when now we go to court, even now, right now, if you take a case to court, you say this was so-and-so's candidate, what evidentiary documents or what will you tell the court to demonstrate that this particular candidate belonged to this section? That is where cases fail, by the way. So I think we should be fair, yes. IEBC should reprimand and even, you know, bar candidates or cancel elections altogether. But citizens must be willing to come out and say, I saw so-and-so use the firearm, and therefore it is this gentleman. That way you can then help the IEBC and you can help the courts as well.
Osido.
What these by-elections mean are that now for people who have not had their representatives in the 23 different electoral positions, post-November 27th, now they will have. The people of Baringo will have a senator, the people of Ugunja, and the people that have powers to poach people should be told that it is costly, you know, to have by-elections because you took people from a certain house and you put them in the cabinet or wherever, and that now taxpayers have to be used. But either way, the people of Ugunja will also have there because one of the experts was donated by the party. So at least in terms of representation, that is going to live the spirit of the Constitution because it is a constitutional requirement that Kenyans across the country are represented in the different houses. Number two, I'm still really bothered about public servants and government officials having to leave their offices instead of rendering services to the people to go and campaign, so that a deputy president camps in Bear and Off for almost close to the entire campaign period. Really, why? So that a CS for public service has to leave serious government service delivery assignments, you know, to go and campaign because it is a by-election. And the same applies to other leaders, you know. My good friend Wandai, my good friend Mbadi, Treasury, who went to Homa Bay and among other places, and all the others, including governors and MCAs and all these people are campaigning. And I think that this has also been canvassed in a number of even petitions in the courts. But why is it so hard to come to a closure? It's almost the same to the question of campaign financing, that the same house has, has failed to pass a law on campaign financing. So it is important for us to learn certain lessons, but really to weigh them down. And it is incumbent upon IEBC and the relevant institutions to guide this country, because I'm imagining a scenario where we only now have 23, by-elections happening and look at the degree of investment of government officials. What if it was now for the general election? Of course, there is a campaign period, but still, does it really mean anything to the people who still require services? Number three, I still believe that it is not, that no Kenyan must die because we are having an election. Mm-hmm. And so for those who still use violence, we really have to call upon the security apparatus. And the beauty about our country and other jurisdictions come to Kenya to learn and also to benchmark how we run our elections is that we have something called the multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder forum that is convened by IEBC that also brings together the entire security infrastructure. Why is it difficult to just prosecute someone because somebody passed because of a campaign? And I don't think that that life is so cheap, because even post the announcement and the surrender of the certificate, there are families that are going to be planning for burials. Mm-hmm. There are children who are going to be, going to be thinking about their fathers who are no longer there. There are families that are going to be thinking about this by-election, not because of the constitutional space that we have, but because a member of our family passed on. Must it be like that? Okay, fine. So what if it is a general election and we have 10 deaths across the country, or deaths in 10 electoral units in the country? I think that would be really too much for us to think through. Number four, we really have to look at certain electoral laws, and particularly recommendations that have been made by the Supreme Court in petitions and also even by IEBC itself. Of course, Stella said that IEBC is an ongoing concern, is an institution that stays in power and remains. But I more or less tend to disagree a little bit because of the powers that the commissioners have. Because the Secretariat exists to provide that technical support, but the powers that the commissioners have still indicate that we were even unable to have the by-elections because the Secretariat was there, but the commissioners were not there. So much so that we had to put in place the commissioners for the by-elections to happen. So it therefore means that the commissioners really become the central focus of what the commission does, or what the country still waits for IEBC to do. And it's an important question, because I remember that even in the petition of 2022 and presidential petition of 2022 and 2017 and 2022, that question came up. But it's a question that we still really have not found a response to. And I think that moving forward, and particularly because the level and degree of interest of Kenyans in elections is also coming up. So we really have to ask ourselves, what if anything happens? Commissioners are in Naivasha, they're having their retreat, God forbid, a plane or a chopper lands on that hotel and all of them are not there. May God forgive me for saying that.
Not a good wish.
But I tend to ask myself, listening to what Stella has said, and of course Ishmael and Osido here, the feeling that perhaps much more should have been done by the IEBC, and of course others are saying this is like a litmus test for the IEBC to show what they are possibly able to do come the 2027 general election. But if we paint a futuristic picture into the 2027 general election, based on what the IEBC has done, the preparedness and the way the IEBC has conducted itself, what do you make of what would be the likely scenario of the 2027 general election?
I've been lucky to have an insider view of IBC for a very long time. And Kenya's got very unique, strange electoral laws. That everything, even how you're going to stand at the ballot box, everything is almost defined by law. And that is why you don't have so many petitions, especially outside the presidential election. You don't have many petitions succeeding, because it's a very, very solid framework. The only challenge in my view we have with the IBC is an issue of trust deficit and a very horrible communication. And we've said times above number that it is an organization called IBC. They must publicize and they must let everybody know that they've created predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes. Most of the issues or concerns raised by either candidates or people who are going to vote, in fact, are covered by law. The challenge has been IBC engaging with stakeholders, engaging with citizens, engaging with partners, and really defining everything that this is how elections are done in Kenya. Most of the guys who lose elections when they go to the courts, and if you speak to lawyers, especially petition lawyers, they'll tell you those cases hardly succeed because it's very rigged. Now, in this age today where we have misinformation and disinformation, when a political party raises issues, even if those issues appear to IBC to be frivolous, IBC must come out and state their position, because with social media today in Kenya, anybody with a mobile phone can go to the top of the mountain and proclaim something about IBC. So in my view, IBC needs to be super active, they need to be proactive, and remember one thing, that their major responsibility is to ensure that Kenyans trust in IBC. You remember, it's because of the trust deficit that in past elections, a presidential candidate would say the elections were not free, fair, nor credible, and 50% of the nation would believe that. Now, if IBC goes the extra mile and they publicize everything that they are doing to ensure that the election actually reflects the voters' interests and aspirations, then when you get walloped in an election, then you say that it was because of rigging and everything else, people will roll their eyes and say, you actually beaten. Because you see, majority of politicians, when they lose an election, they look for straws to clash on, because they'll not accept that I did not win. They have to look for a reason, or they will say I didn't have enough resources.
But doesn't the biometric identification prevent the possibility of issues like impersonation or multiple voting, meaning that the system itself, given what we've had previously, is able to protect any election from likely rigging and making the results credible? I don't know what you think about this, Stella.
Yeah, but just allow me to clarify, to finish a point which was raised by Stella here about EACC. As I see EACC is a toothless bulldog in these elections, because EACC in the past has presented evidence that candidate A is a thief. This candidate doesn't have the right kind of academic qualification. In fact, this candidate has got voodoo papers. These candidates cannot even be the chairman of a cattle dip. But guess what? Those are the candidates who are declared. And lawyers would tell you that you've not exhausted the appeal mechanism. So people go into the ballot box knowing that, don't you remember, don't you remember Dr. Matiang'i warning Kenyans that a number of guys you are about to elect are wash, they do money laundering, and we elected them to the National Assembly and Senate, and when we get a bill coming to stop money laundering, we expect that they'll actually stop. These are the candidates who are warned off, that even President Ruto himself says Parliament is corrupt. So then you begin to wonder, if as Kenyans we don't elect the sharpest tools in the shed, people with character, to go to the National Assembly, how are we going to secure Kenya's interest? In the last few days, you've seen the National Land Commission coming up with very interesting rulings around land allocation and reallocation. Land meant to go to the marginalized in society, it's finding its ways to national and county elites. There's even a matter around Kakuzi. Now you would expect that if you elected leaders with character to the National Assembly and Senate, they will come out and defend the marginalized person. But when they are the National Land Commission can do this, can I have a piece of land? What do? They land there like vultures to take part in that party. And then we have ourselves to blame. And I think at some stage, we may probably need to adopt those dramatic Chinese or Japanese models of dealing with thieves. That are, if there's evidence that you're a thief, we take you to a national park, sorry, a public park, and we shoot you. Because how do you expect Kenya to become a first world when the people we elect to the national office, the only reason why they go to office, the only reason why they go to the National Assembly is because they score an A in wash.
All right.
Yes.
You know, I want us to look keenly at some of the constituencies where you've seen a lot of heated debate. I want us to look at Berry North constituency, the bearing of this constituency in terms of the outcome. What do you feel about it? We've seen the Deputy President Kindiki has been campaigning for UDA's candidate Leonard Wamuthende, and on the other end we have seen former Deputy President Rigathi positioning himself as the kingpin of the Mount Kenya region and saying that they will know who is the actual kingpin. We've seen a flare of activities, an exchange of words. What's the bearing of the Mbere North constituency outcome on these particular by-elections? I'll start with you, Stella.
Let me just start by giving 2 lines on the first question that you had asked me that I didn't get to respond to. I think, first of all, to agree with Dismas that a lot has been done to ensure that the Kenyan elections are airtight. And some good minds have gone into doing that kind of work. Definitely the biometric system and all the different registration systems that we have are supposed to secure that and are supposed to get that done. So unless there's an announcement that maybe some of these kits are not working, not charged, whatever it is, many times that is supposed to take care of everything. The mischief is in the individuals who handle these things, forgetting to charge those instruments sometimes and those kinds of things, or the polling stations that may not necessarily have the kind of infrastructure and electricity to support the tools. But I think a lot of work has gone into that. Now, about how the campaigns have taken shape, and especially the areas where there's a lot of noise, and I think I'd already started talking about this. This is a really high-stake election because a party like ODM is testing its power after Baba has left. They want to check if they still hold the ground the way they do, and to check if many people in the party are checking to see if the party is truly dead so that they can move into another party after the by-election, or plan to move out of the party in the next election. A party like UDA knows that it has lost a lot of ground, and so I think they are the ones with the highest stake in this election because they must prove to citizens that they are still popular. And unfortunately, they're basically taking means that are even unorthodox in our elections to just try and prove that, including using state force to stop even campaigns in some areas. The other thing is that you have new parties participating in the elections, like DCP, and you have a man who has everything to prove because he was impeached, he was sent home, he was supposed to be dead, and he has decided that he's going to demonstrate that he was the power behind the presidency and that he is going to deliver the presidency into the hands of another individual, because I know for a fact that he's not going to be on the ballot paper for the next election. This is Ricky G. So there are very, very high stakes in this election. You can tell the areas they have chosen to prove themselves. And those areas have been carefully selected because of the nature of the voters, the communities they come from, what those communities mean to the votes, to the votes in this nation, and determining how people are behaving around those areas so that every party will know. For example, in Malava, you will know that there's a new party, not necessarily a new party, but Eugene Wamala's party has something to prove, number one. But number two, and most important, it's a party where they are going to be able to tell whether the influence that Baba used to have on Western Kenya has been lost now that he is not there. And so, of course, that is something that they must fight for. They are also thinking it's up for grabs. So UDA is thinking this we must take, and that is hence their investment in Malava. In Bere, the comedy in the campaigns in Bere should tell you that Rigiji thinks this is an easy ride home, you know? And the government is not taking any prisoners on this one. They have decided they are going to make sure that they win this election, because if they lose this one, it basically means they have lost the ground in Central. They need to prove that Rigiji has gone, but they have not lost Central, irrespective of how obvious the reality is. I am saying that this election is a space where men are trying to prove that they have wide and powerful thoraxes. And they're going to do that by all means possible, whether it is spending money, whether it is lying, whether it's engaging in violence. They're doing everything. And this is why I was saying this is one of those elections where the IEBC and all the actors who work with them should have cracked the whip on everyone and made sure that this misbehavior does not move into the next election, because it will. It will. And the next election is going to have more constituencies to work with. There's going to be more money. There are going to be more stakes. And of course, the battle is going to be even harder, because now it will not just be about by-elections for MCA, Senate, MP positions. It's going to be elections all the way to the presidency.
Osido, in the likelihood that UDA fails to take the seat in Mbere North constituency, what does that mean for UDA come 2027 general election?
It's just two things. That one, we accept the win, we concede, and we reorganize ourselves, prepare properly if in the event that the by-election was not properly prepared for. So you reorganize yourselves. On the other hand, you fold up and you either merge up with other people or you form up other new political parties like we have seen in this country, rather than ODM, because TNA was formed, it camouflaged, got into Jubilee, and many things happened. Remember, even Jubilee is also trying to show up some face in between this particular by-election, because it has walked some quite a rough path up to the courts, and many things that have happened, and now they are trying to come up. So for UDA, despite the investment, it is also a do or die, and especially within Mount Kenya region, particularly centering on Mbeere North, so that they are able to show up their muscle, their power. And it's even going to be much more harder for them, because this seat is one that was initially held by a cabinet secretary. So you also have to really prepare to show something for why we are doing it. Like, okay, the CS went, how many young people have gotten jobs because you are CS for public service, and that we can be able to even trade if we were to push it that further with the number of votes that you can get, because we are seeing UDA delivering something meaningful for us. How many young people have gotten, government opportunities, because including tenders, because yes, now you went into government, and we have to redo this election because we want more of those kind of spaces. Because yes, if we have one of us in government, then it means that big doors are opening. So for UDA as the government of the day, the stakes become much more higher. And really, politically speaking, other than the economic angle, is also to show that the former deputy president had serious issues, that really blocked development and success for our region. And that his leaving now means that we have much more something important.
I see.
I think you need to cut it short. I don't know if you look at the absurdity of our position sometimes, even as professionals, as analysts. This is not cast on stone. I mean, we can't fully conclude that these elections, if UDA loses, they will also lose in 2027. If Jubilee wins, or ODM for that matter. Why? Because we have 23 areas, including MCS, being elected now in a by-election. And all energies of the political parties are going to these 23 locations. In 2027, they will not be going to 23 locations. They will be going to nationwide polling stations. So everybody will be for himself and God for us all. So politicians cannot just conclude that if they win in Mbeere North now, they will win in Mbeere North in 2027. I'm not just being critical of that view. This has about 40% factual statement when you say that this will be a litmus test. That is good for political commentating and for informing our viewers. But it is not always obvious that if you win in Mbeere North, you will again win in Mbeere North the next time. But before, give me a minute, Osido, you just give me the mic. Give me a minute.
You just jumped into
my mic.
You just jumped into it.
No, because
I'm about to jump in as well.
So my point is these things are not cast in stone. I want you to pay attention, for example, to Nyamira County now. I mean, there was a lot of hullabaloo about campaigning for this candidate and that candidate, and the president is against our person here, and our person is supporting this one. Then all of a sudden this evening, just this evening, the governor for Nyamira is impeached. And voters, by the way, are like a dancer who is playing to some amapiano or Suko's dance, beats. The most forceful, powerful guy can actually lose in an election, depending on how he's simply playing the beats. And if the music is cut before the beat is, the lyrics are cut as the dancer was moving, then you find that the more powerful person has actually lost. So the dynamics in Nyamira, for example, from my humble view, can easily change by the fact that the governor is impeached just a night or two before the elections. Those dynamics can change. I don't want to predict here what that means for the Kenya Kwanza and for the UPA teams in Nyamira, but that has an impact because some voters get scared. Some voters, they become, they lose morale to actually go and vote. So those impacts all over play a part. So there is no guarantee that if you win in Ekerenyo, or you win in Nyamira, or you win in Malava, automatically you will win in 2027 as well.
I know we have to come to a close of this conversation. Such a beautiful conversation we've had there. I know what you're saying. Pardon?
No closing remarks?
Well, I'm told we've run out of time, but I can quickly just give you 5 seconds each to just give your closing remarks on tonight's discussion. I'll begin with you, Osido, because I can see you really, really want to talk.
No, I wanted
These are closing remarks. Don't bring an argument.
No, because you answered your own question. I know you answered what was not asked.
Okay, you're wasting time.
I think I just wanted to tell the good lawyer that he answered the question which was not asked, because the question was not about Nyamira, but about Mbere and UDA. But anyway, I think that a part of the investment in our electoral security system is largely because of the distrust that we have in the institution called IEBC. And I think that part of the lessons, therefore, should inform how we invest in helping the electorate to trust the processes of the commission and the commission itself, and therefore really doing away with the cost of elections in this country. I think part of why it is very, very costly is because of the investment that we put in our system. So much so that we have to print our ballots in Greece, and 2027 maybe be printed somewhere. Number two is, I'm still bothered as I finish on what we call digital voting, that we still have to close shop, go and queue, and wait for long hours. Is it possible that we can be thinking through the opportunity to work through elections like M-Pesa, that I can sit at the comfort of my home, and like it is happening in other jurisdictions, and you vote? And this has been tried even locally by even schools, where they have done elections local.
Let's hear from Dismas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If there's a gentleman who is having sleepless nights in Kenya, and not on account of food insecurity in his home state or pecuniary challenges, is the deputy president. Because if UDA does not win this by-election in Bere, then probability of him being a one-term deputy president is extremely high. And if you look at the theory, you would say, come on, by-elections do not matter. But by-elections are very key in perception management and consequences management. Because if we win a by-election, then you come back to town and say, can you see what we did in a by-election? It's going to be a replica. But in theory, you would say it could be 40 or 60%. Yeah. But if you lose a by-election, people will say, you had all the time to focus in one constituency and you lost. So it's, you can do a lot of propaganda. And also in Malava, as I indicated, by-elections are becoming very strategic. That now you have Musalia Mudavadi, Wetangula, and Oparanya. And you remember Oparanya was a reluctant campaigner. But I think with the exit of Mr. Raila Odinga, there are going to be many political orphans, as you've seen in Homa Bay. Even for Gladys Wanga today, along Professor Kithure Kindiki, somebody is going to be having sleepless nights is Gladys Wanga. If the candidate supported by the deputy governor and Owid wins, then also Gladys Wanga would have done successfully as a one-term governor.
Let's hear from Ishmael, please.
Well, I think I already shared my views, but it seems to me that Kenyans, not only on the MCAs and members of parliament, senators, governors, and the presidency, they seem to be gearing towards a one-term season. They do not seem to be willing to revote people back, especially because of the hardships they have suffered, yes.
Stella?
3 things. 1, we will be here with Nyaribo when the chips fall.
Thank you.
Where they will fall, and he will see what we're talking about people moving and people planning their shifts for 2027, the next election. The second thing is that for IEBC, trust is a commodity they cannot afford to play around with. And trust is the one thing that they must earn. IEBC does not have a legal problem. It does not have a systems problem. IEBC has a people problem. If this commission is able to address the people problem in the commission, it will have dealt with a lot of other problems around. I wish all the candidates who are participating in this election the best. May the best men, the God-chosen men, win. And I hope that the voters are going to be wise enough to ensure that if the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has let them down in vetting these people, if IEBC has let them down in vetting these people, they do the right thing and make sure that these people do not get through the ballot and become their representatives.
We have 2 women running. Stella.
Thank you, gentlemen and lady, for making time. Dismas Mukua, political analyst, Kevin Osido, executive director for County Governance Watch, and of course Ishmael Nyaribo, a lawyer, and Stella Agara, governance analyst. Thank you so much for making time. Indeed, we wait to see what will be happening on Thursday. Remember, we will be having live coverage of Thursday's by-elections. You don't want to miss, so keep it KTN. We'll be giving you updates and telling you everything that happens around the by-elections and across the country. Thank you for watching. My name is Leangare. This has been KTN Prime, and my sign language interpreter has been Preeti Janet. Until tomorrow, same time, same place. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.